Next to Terry Gilson's head, the phone rang sharply. He woke up with a start. "What the hell?" he muttered. The phone rang again. He picked up the receiver. "Hello," he mumbled, coughing heavily. "Mr. Gilson?" "Yes. This is Sergeant Preston from the Yukon County Police Department. May I speak to Mrs. Turvey?" An authoritative voice sounded in Gilson's ear. "Who is this?" "Mr. Gilson, please connect me to Mrs. Turvey. This is the police. It's urgent." Again, the tone was clear and demanding. "One moment," Gilson muttered. He handed the phone to the woman lying next to him. "Your phone. It's the police," he said simply. "What?" She snatched the phone from his hands. "Hello." "Good morning, my dear unfaithful wife," came the overly cheerful greeting. "I hope you slept well last night after you and your lover finished having fun." "Oh my God, Mick. Mick, is that you?" "Of course it's me, darling. I called to give you some important information." "Mick, Mick, please," she tried. "First of all, you can throw away your house keys. They don't work anymore. Also, I changed the code on the garage door." "Mick, please. It's not what you think," she cried. "You don't know what I think, Sheila. But I didn't call to discuss that with you. I just called to tell you that your credit cards are no longer valid, and you can pick up your clothes and toiletries from the plastic boxes by the side gate whenever you want." His voice was cold as ice. "No, no, 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 Mick, please. Don't do this, please," my wife begged desperately. "It's too late, honey. I've already done it." "But where am I supposed to go now?" she cried. "Well, as the immortal Rhett Butler said, frankly, my dear, I don't care." The phone slammed down angrily. "I started this process a few weeks ago, but this morning was the decisive moment. If I hadn't been so sure she was sleeping in Gilson's room, I wouldn't have even tried this trick." I was surprised at how easy it was and how empty the moment felt. A cuckold's victory, I thought. Too little, too late. Perhaps it would be appropriate to describe my situation. My name is Michael Mick Turvey. I'm 43 years old and work as a sales representative for a company that manufactures building materials. I have been with the company for over 20 years. Almost exactly 20 years ago, I married Sheila Pratt. Next month, we were supposed to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. I considered our marriage a success. We had 2 wonderful children. Our first daughter, Angela, my angel, was born a year and a half after our wedding, and our son Ben was born 2 years later. I loved my wife and children with all my heart. They were the meaning of my life. No man could be as proud of his family as I was. We lived in a modest house, but it had everything a family needed. This 2-story, 3-bedroom house was our second home, purchased 4 years ago. It wasn't new, but we decided to renovate it and make it our own. A new kitchen, then a renovated basement with a workshop for me, and a large family room where the children could play, a garage where we parked our cars, and then new furniture for the living room and dining room. I felt like we had the perfect life. It wasn't easy. It was a completely new way of life for me. It was a struggle. I managed, but not without difficulty. After a year of college, I asked myself if I wanted to do this for the next 3 years. When I asked myself that question, it became clear that the answer was no. I found an office job downtown, and every morning I would take the bus, work 9 hours, take the bus again, and go home. After a few months, I realized that this couldn't be my future. I needed something more. I stuck it out for almost 2 years, but I was constantly looking for something better. If you had asked me what my career would be after college, I wouldn't have known what to say. I certainly wouldn't have considered myself a salesperson. In my mind, a salesperson was someone who went door to door selling brushes, kitchen utensils, or magazines. That was definitely not me. When I saw what industrial salespeople did, I got a different impression. You had to know your product well and show people that it was as good as, if not better than, the one they were using, and then convince them to buy it. More importantly, I liked the technical side of things. I quickly realized that sales is a strategy. What do you have that the customer needs? Why should they buy it from you? I applied for a transfer to one of the operating branches and was given the opportunity to work in the sales department. That's how it all started, and the more I saw, the more I realized that this was exactly what I wanted to do. I started work without a car and still living with my parents. When I moved to the operations department, nothing changed. I was a newbie with a small salary and took the bus to work. When I received my first paycheck, I decided to open a bank account. Until then, I had been living paycheck to paycheck, and now everything was going to change. For convenience, I chose a bank near the bus stop and went inside. When I approached the customer service desk, I froze in my tracks. I was served by a young woman named Sheila Pratt. I hesitated a little, but since there were several people in front of me, I had a chance to calm down and think about what to say. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, but when I looked closely, I found that she was as beautiful as I remembered. Sheila quickly served the people in front of me, and then it was my turn. "Hi, Sheila," I said, stepping forward. She clearly didn't know I was in line and was surprised to see me in front of her. "Hi, Mick," she said after a moment's pause. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to open an account. I need to transfer my salary." "Oh. Oh, of course. I'll call someone to help you," she said with a smile. "Yes, thank you. Nice to see you again," I replied weakly. "Yes, nice to see you too." The smile seemed sincere to me. A week later, I returned to the bank to pick up my checkbooks and saw Sheila again. This time she was walking down the street delivering mail, as I understood. I stood in line and watched her, wondering what was going on in her life. There was only one way to find out. After picking up the box of checks at the service counter, I looked around for Sheila and saw her standing at a side table, clearly not busy. I walked over to her. "Hi," I said, smiling. "Hi, how are you?" she asked. Her smile was the same as I remembered from when we met. It was sincere, honest, and very attractive. "I'm doing well. I'm working at Polar Industries now. I'm in sales," I replied. "That's great. Do you like it? Is it a promising job?" she asked with interest. "Yeah. I like the company and the products they sell. I think I'm lucky." "That's good, Mick. I'm glad to hear it." Um, Sheila, would you like to go for a coffee? Or something?" I asked hesitantly. "We could catch up on what's new." "Sure. That would be nice. I'll be free in a few minutes. Wait for me, and we'll go to the caf? Next door," she suggested. "Great," I said with a big smile. "I'll wait for you on the bench in front of the entrance." That's how our reunion began. And after a few dates, we went back to the way things were before. I was 21, just starting my career, and Sheila was looking for a husband. The following spring, I proposed to her, and she accepted. A year later in May, we got married and were full of hope for the future. A year and a half after the wedding, Angela was born. From the moment she was born, she was a daddy's girl. When she was little, if she got upset or cried, I would pick her up, she would calm down, smile at me, and everything would be fine again. I always thought I wanted a son, but Angie was everything I could have hoped for. 2 years later, our son Ben was born, and I was as happy as a father could be. Sheila was a special parent to Ben, and I was to Angela, I thought it was the perfect family. Sheila often told me the same thing. She was happy and content with our life, she told me. We had our moments, but they never lasted long, and I knew I was lucky. I had a wonderful wife and 2 beautiful children. Right after Angie was born, I was put in charge of the sales district, and I was on cloud 9. I took to it like a duck to water, and within a couple of years, I was earning almost twice as much as when I started. Success breeds success, and now I was earning far more than I had expected when I started working at Polar. 5 years later, we were able to buy our first home. It was a small bungalow, but it was ours. Sheila spent hours poring over magazines looking for the right things. Angie and Ben were also involved in the selection, but it was Sheila who chose the decor and colors. I just stood there and admired how my family had come together. We celebrated our 10th wedding anniversary in the same house, and more than 30 people came to the anniversary party. I was proud of my accomplishments, but I was even more proud of my family. My children were well behaved and did well in school. My wife was an exemplary homemaker and mother. Both parents believed that the sun and moon revolved around us. What more could I want? When Angie turned 14, she started her period. At first, Sheila was happy to help Angie understand what was happening and how to deal with it. Things went well for a few weeks, but then I noticed a change. Angie didn't seem as close to her mother as she used to be. It wasn't obvious, but to me, as someone close to my daughter, it was noticeable. I couldn't find a reason for this change in behavior, and discussing it with Sheila was useless. She didn't want to discuss or even acknowledge the change. She insisted that it was my imagination and a male inability to understand female psychology. It still bothered me, but since it didn't seem to affect the rest of the family, I accepted it. Ben always seemed well-adjusted. He was very close to his mother, and although I loved him as much as I loved Angie, I knew that if he ever had serious problems, he would turn to his mother for help first. That didn't bother me in the least. All families form alliances with their parents, and those alliances must be recognized and respected. Thanks to my success, I continued to climb the career ladder, and although I realized that sales management was probably not my calling, I wanted to at least be given the opportunity. I had the most productive and profitable region, and I wondered what I needed to do to move to the next level. Finally, I realized that in order for that opportunity to arise, I needed to take on a leadership role. Shortly after Angie started high school, Sheila came to me and asked if I would mind if she went back to work. She had been a stay-at-home mom for 16 years and felt she needed something to do besides laundry, ironing, and sewing. I couldn't think of a reason why not, but I asked her to make sure that whatever she decided to do wouldn't interfere with the children or take away from our time together. She assured me that it wouldn't. After several months of searching, she found a job as an administrator at a car dealership. It wasn't full-time, and it suited us both. She worked there in the mornings from 9 to 1, Monday through Saturday. Since I played golf on Saturday mornings, I decided that this schedule worked well for me. The pay wasn't great, but we weren't starving, and her extra income could be used as vacation money. If it worked for her, it worked for me. Our life went on like this for a couple more years until one day Sheila came home with some disturbing news. "Guess what, Mick?" she said, unable to hide her excitement. "What?" "Terry Gilson is back in town," she said, watching my reaction closely. "Oh, what brought him back?" "You know his father is a big businessman. Terry is now the assistant CEO at his father's car dealership," she said, still not looking as casual as she wanted to. "What car dealership is that?" I asked, knowing full well the answer. Um, ours, I mean the one I work at, Century Ford," she stammered. "And what does that mean for you?" I asked, beginning to realize that there was more to the story. Um, I'm going to, I was asked to hire his assistant," she finally said. "Wow, that's a big step. From temporary secretary to assistant to the CEO. I didn't know they had such a large staff." I'm sure my tone was sarcastic and I didn't try to hide it. "You don't look very happy," she remarked. "No, you're dating Gilson. I played with him. We both know what kind of person he is. He bragged about all his conquests. Is your name still on his list?" It was a cheap shot, and I knew it as soon as I said it. "That's awful. Are you saying you don't trust me?" she asked. I was forced to remain silent. "No, I'm saying I don't trust him." Her face flushed, and for the first time in a long time, she was genuinely angry. "Mick, take that back. You have no right to accuse me, and what's more, you just said I can't be trusted," she muttered. "I didn't say that. I said I don't trust him. I said we both know what a snake he is. It may have been 20 years, but a leopard doesn't change its spots." I made it clear that I wasn't going to back down. "Just ask yourself," I continued. "How did a part-time secretary go from entry-level to assistant to the boss's son in one fell swoop? I want to know," I demanded. "Because I have a talent for this job," she replied sharply. "Terry said I was made for it." "You don't think I'm capable, do you?" she retorted. "No, I don't. I don't work there, but one thing I know for sure. This whole thing smells like typical Gilson. He's setting you up, and you'd better be very careful, my dear." Now I was standing right in front of her. She couldn't fail to understand my fears and suspicions about Terry Gilson's motives. All I could do was hope that my message had gotten through. "You're jealous. You don't want me to succeed because it will make you look bad. That's what it is. You're jealous," she said mockingly. Arguing was pointless and she wasn't listening. I sighed heavily, turned around, and went down to the basement to drink a cold beer and think things over. I had no illusions about Gilson's motives. He saw an attractive woman whom he thought he could get without much effort. What did it matter that she was married? Perhaps he remembered me from school and didn't consider me a serious obstacle. I decided to keep a close eye on developments. Of that I was sure. A week passed before we returned to our quiet family life. Unfortunately, our argument with Sheila had been overheard by the children. It was hard not to hear us both raising our voices. As always, when things had calmed down, Angie came up to me when I was alone. "Hi, Dad. Are you okay?" "Hi, Angie." "Yes, I'm fine," I lied. "I couldn't help but hear you arguing," she confessed. Who is this guy Gilson? The guy your mom was dating in high school. He was our quarterback. I played with him for a year. I tried to warn your mom. He's not a very good guy and he doesn't respect women very much, I said sadly. I don't think you told mom what she wanted to hear, she said quietly. No, I don't think so. I think she sees it as a great opportunity and an important job. She'll probably go from part-time to full-time, so I guess there will be some changes in our daily routine, I suggested. That's okay, Dad. I'll help with the cooking, laundry, and other things. I guess she'll be making a lot more money now, right? I think so. We haven't talked about it yet. We'll see, Angie. I hope it doesn't turn out to be a big mistake for your mom, I said, putting my arm around her and pulling her close. I just hope everything works out. As I suspected, it was a full-time job and the salary was more than double what she had been earning. So, in that respect, she was generously rewarded for her work. However, I had my doubts about the job itself. When I cautiously asked Sheila what she did during the day, she replied vaguely, but what I heard sounded very unstructured. If I understood her correctly, it seemed that she had to respond to Gilson's calls. Over time, I became less and less interested in her work. She left for work just before 9 in the morning and returned home at 5 in the evening. No overtime, no special assignments, just routine work. As a result, we didn't have to sacrifice anything. My workday was longer than hers, and I often came home after 6 and left for work at 7 in the morning. I left before everyone woke up, so my time with my family was limited to evenings and weekends. Our sex life was never hot. It just wasn't Sheila's style. We did it, usually a couple of times a week, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. After Gilson came along, I watched closely for changes in our lives, but I didn't notice anything unusual. We did pretty much the same things we had always done. I always tried to get along with my neighbors. It made life much easier. The McDonalds, who lived next door, were quiet and quite elderly. Their children had grown up and moved away, and we didn't have much in common with them. We were polite and helped each other out when necessary, but otherwise we weren't close. The Romanovs, who lived next door on the other side, were completely different. They had small children, and in the early years we often looked after them. We got along very well with them and often had barbecues in the yard and played cards at each other's houses. Jimmy and Felicia were probably our best friends. Jimmy was an accountant and worked at a large GM dealership in town. I'd forgotten about it, but when he pulled up in his van with the dealership's name on the side, I remembered. One late Sunday morning, Jimmy was mowing his lawn before mowing his lawn, and I stopped by for a minute. "Hey, Jimmy, how's it going?" I started. "Well, same old. I guess everything's fine," he smiled. "Yeah, same old. Listen, I have a question for you." I tried to make it sound casual. "Go ahead." "You work at a big car dealership. Does the CEO usually have an assistant?" "I mean, an assistant to the CEO?" "Yes, big car dealerships usually have someone who fills in for the boss when he's not there." "And does that assistant have an assistant, like a Friday girl?" He looked at me strangely, and then I saw a sparkle in his eyes. His face became funny and he looked very uncomfortable. "Not usually," he finally said. "I thought so," I nodded. "Thanks, Jimmy." I turned and headed back toward the house. My suspicions were confirmed. "Mick," he called after me. I stopped and turned around as he approached me. "I know what you're thinking. I have some connections there. Let me see what I can find without attracting attention," he said quietly. I looked at him for what seemed like a long time, then nodded. "Thanks again." I don't really understand why I asked Jimmy that question after all that. Maybe I was afraid of the answer. There wasn't the slightest hint that anything was going on, but I think it made me wary, and incidentally, it still makes me feel uneasy. Jimmy knew who Sheila worked for and what her position was, but he didn't say a word about it. I just put him in an awkward position, and he reacted the way a good friend should. Even though Sheila wasn't working on Saturday morning, I continued to play golf until morning. The Saturday after my conversation with Jimmy turned out to be cool and windy, but at least it didn't rain. I played with our usual foursome, and none of us played very well. The wind made it feel even colder, and none of us were very comfortable. We were all glad to finish the game and get back to the club. As usual, after changing, we met at the 19th hole, and the winners toasted the losers. Today, my partner and I went shopping. When I entered the hall, I saw Jimmy Romano sitting alone at a table by the TV. He was sipping a drink, and I walked over to him. I didn't know you played golf, I said with a smile. I don't know. You know me better than that, he laughed. What brought you here? I asked, almost guessing the answer. I wanted to talk to you. Alone, he said, suddenly becoming serious. I nodded. I was sure that was the point. Give me a minute. I'll deal with the winners and be right back, I promised. It didn't take me long to bring the guys their drinks and explain that I needed to step away to talk to someone. 5 minutes later, I was sitting at Jimmy's table. So I'm guessing you heard about my question the other day, I said, leaning back in my chair. Yes, I wish I had better news for you, Mick. I really do, he said sadly, barely looking me in the eye. Just say it, Jimmy. I can take it, I said with more confidence than I felt at that moment. Well, Gilson is probably the most unpopular person in this dealership. The people I've talked to think he's a parasite and completely useless. He goes around making everyone he meets angry. He has nothing to do because no one wants him to do anything. He'll just mess things up as he's proven time and time again. Jimmy fell silent and took a sip from his glass. No surprise there, I said, trying to remain calm. So where's Sheila? He looked at me with the most frightened expression I had ever seen on his face. He really didn't want to tell me what he was about to say. Sheila spends most of the day in his office, sometimes typing letters and bringing him coffee. The only time she moves quickly is when old man Gilson shows up, and then she disappears into the parts department or the employee break room. When the old man leaves, everything goes back to normal, Jimmy said. I don't think old man Gilson knows about Sheila and her mysterious work, I said grimly. Jimmy just nodded. Then he fell silent and I knew there was more. Spill it, Jimmy. I won't bite, I promised. They go out to lunch together about twice a week. They leave before noon and don't come back until 2 or 2:30. Since she started working there? I asked, finally shaken. No, it started a few months ago, he guessed. One day, one of their clever salesmen followed them. They went to the Carlton Hotel on Banner Road. That's pretty far for lunch, I remarked. Mick, there's no restaurant at the Carlton, he said, almost in a whisper. I felt everything inside me tighten. I froze, unable to move. I could hear my breath coming in gasps as I tried to collect my thoughts. Although I suspected this might happen, I wasn't ready for it. I don't know how long it took before I could form a coherent thought. I'm sorry, Mick, I really didn't want to be the one to... He mumbled. I know, I mumbled. I didn't want to hear that either. We had another drink with Jimmy and reminisced about the good times our families had spent together. There were many happy memories, but we felt like we were saying goodbye to each other. I think we both understood that things would be different now. I felt this pain in my stomach, and it was intense. I drove home preparing myself for Sheila and wondering how I would handle this revelation. I was strangely calm with Jimmy, and it seemed strange to me that I would be able to handle this terrible news. I tried to imagine a scenario in which their afternoon visits to Carlton would become something other than sex, but I realized that was unlikely. What was on the surface was the truth. It wasn't until I was halfway home from the golf club that I started to get angry. 1,000 random thoughts were racing through my head, my emotions were in turmoil until it all boiled down to one horrible fact. She had been cheating on me, and she had done it many, many times. I had been a fool, even though I knew it was a possibility. She had made a fool of me and didn't even bat an eyelid without feeling the slightest bit of guilt. Day after day, she had made me a cuckold. It was then, after this realization, that anger began to grow inside me. I pride myself on my common sense and my aversion to rash actions. I pulled over a few blocks from home because I knew I couldn't go in and talk to Sheila. Not only would it have been unwise, but I was also certain it wouldn't help. If I thought it was just a one-time thing, I might have been able to get over it and we could have moved on. But that wasn't the case. It had obviously been going on for a year. All that time, Sheila had been playing the role of the happy housewife with a loving family. It was deception of the highest order. Sitting in my car, I decided that this would come at a very high price. I would act as normal as possible. But on Monday, I would begin the process of ending this charade and getting revenge. I was determined to cause as much damage as possible to Terry Gilson and Sheila Pratt-Turvey. I would play by the rules and the law, but I would do everything in my power to destroy them both. The rest of the weekend was spent in agonizing politeness on my part. I kept my anger and disappointment from spilling over onto my family. There would be plenty of time for that when all the pieces of the puzzle fell into place. I counted the hours until Monday morning. When Monday finally arrived, I got up earlier than usual and left the house before 7. I knew I had a few hours before I could deal with my problem, but I wanted to get out of the house as soon as possible that day. I knew my sales manager, Larry Coleman, was already at the office, and I needed to talk to him about taking some time off to deal with my problem. Our conversation took more than half an hour. I thought he guessed what was going on in my family life when I explained that I needed time off. And fortunately, he was understanding and agreed. He turned out to be a good guy, and I enjoyed working with him. Shortly after 9 in the morning, I called David Murney, our family lawyer, and asked for his advice on a family matter. I knew it wasn't his area of expertise, and I wasn't surprised when he referred me to Lydia Pankratz. I had met Lydia in passing once or twice and heard that she was a very good divorce lawyer. Her services weren't cheap, but at that point the cost didn't matter to me. I arranged to meet Lydia at the end of the day. I knew I would be late, so I called home to leave a message. Angie answered the phone, which surprised me. "Hi, Angie. Are you home?" "Teacher training day," she replied with a hint of sarcasm. "Have you ever noticed that they're always on Fridays or Mondays?" "Yes, I have. Listen, I have a late meeting today, so I won't be home until around 7. Tell your mom, okay?" "Sure, Dad, tell me." "Are you okay?" she asked, curiosity in her voice. "Yeah, sure. Why do you ask?" "I don't know. You seemed out of it over the weekend. Are you sick or something?" "No," I lied. "I'm fine. It's probably just your vivid imagination." I laughed. We said goodbye and I hung up, wondering if Sheila had noticed my unusual behavior. She didn't say anything, but maybe she was just being cautious. I would have to keep an eye on that. I didn't want to give her the wrong answer too soon. Meeting Lydia had shaken me in many ways. First, whatever the reason for the divorce, Sheila had gotten half of everything, the house, the cars, everything. The only good news was that her income was such that I probably wouldn't have to pay alimony if I could prove her infidelity. Judging by her reckless behavior, I doubted it would be difficult to find evidence. As for the children, in order to get custody, I would have to prove abuse, neglect, or some other serious crime. In this jurisdiction, children were almost always awarded to the mother. Angie was 18, so she could make her own decisions, but Ben was only 16 and would have to spend almost 2 years with his mother. I felt terrible, but Lydia said there was probably nothing I could do to change it. That's just how the system works. And that's when things got interesting. Lydia knew I wanted to punish Sheila and Gilson, and she said she could help me. Since Gilson was her boss, I could sue him and the company he worked for as co-conspirators in the divorce case. In other words, since so many people knew about their little game and did nothing to stop it or report it, we could sue them for a very large sum of money. And what's even better, Sheila wouldn't get a penny of it. Lydia said she would deal with Century Ford and start filing for divorce. At that point, the question of the reason for the divorce remained open. I had to decide whether it would be irreconcilable differences or infidelity. Lydia suggested that since their relationship was so predictable, it wouldn't be difficult or expensive to gather photographic evidence to support the case. I said I'd think about it. When I got home that evening, I was greeted by a happy Sheila, who told me that dinner was in the oven and she had poured me a glass of wine. I immediately suspected something was wrong. This behavior was out of character for her. I went upstairs, changed, washed up, and went down to the table. When I sat down at the table, Sheila sat down too, also with a glass of wine. "I have some exciting news, Mick," she began, smiling broadly. "What?" "I've been invited to a regional dealer conference next month in Marysville," she said proudly. "Really? Just you?" I asked, almost knowing the answer before I asked the question. "Well, no. Terry and Kurt Jenkins are going too," she said, sounding a little nervous. "Oh, I see. How long will the conference last?" 3 days. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I'll be back on Sunday." Now her nervousness was obvious. Sounds like you're looking forward to it," I muttered. "Yes, it'll be my first conference. I'm sure I'll learn a lot." She changed instantly. Now she was full of the happy enthusiasm she had had a minute ago. "Yeah, I'm sure you'll learn a lot," I replied with a hint of sarcasm. When my mind caught up with my emotions, I began to realize that this might be the chance I'd been waiting for. She had almost set herself up. "So, you don't mind?" she had asked uncertainly. "Yes, dear. I don't mind. I trust you. I know you won't do anything inappropriate," I said with all the sincerity I could muster. I saw a blush appear on her face for a moment, then she stood up. leaned across the table and kissed me. Thank you, Mick. I finished my meal in silence, and Sheila returned to the living room to watch some mindless television program. I was surprised that I wasn't upset, angry, or anything of the sort. I was stunned. I had just let my wife leave town for 3 days to have fun with some jerk I hated, and I felt nothing. The next 2 days passed normally. Just the usual. I felt fine, but my mind was racing, and I wondered how it would all end. I started thinking about Ben and Angie. What would they think? How would they react? When I ruined their lives, would they hate me? I couldn't think of any way to protect them from what I was about to do except to call it off and let Sheila continue what she was doing. Deep down, I knew I would never let that happen. On Thursday morning, Lydia called me at the office and asked to meet with me that afternoon. We agreed on 3 o'clock, and I arrived early. I wanted to get her up to speed quickly and get the process started. I made a few decisions. Lydia, something interesting happened on Monday. Sheila told me she's been invited to a regional Ford dealer conference in Marysville in 3 weeks. You won't be surprised to hear that she's going with Terry Gilson and another guy from their office. I paused, waiting for her reaction. You're right. That's not surprising at all. My sources say it's been planned for a long time. I think Monday was when she finally got up the nerve to tell you, she replied calmly. Yes, on Monday. How did you find out? I asked with a smile. Well, it's a trade secret. But let's just say she's not as smart as she thinks she is, Lydia smiled. I've decided we need to try and get some photos. That would allow us to file for adultery, right? I asked. Yes, of course. Now we know they always book the same hotel room. That's stupid. My friend, we'll get photographic evidence this week, and that will be enough to file a case. But that's not all, she smiled. I looked at her satisfied smile and waited for her to continue. Century Ford is owned by Terry Gilson's father, Knox Gilson, as you probably know. I know that every employee's contract has a clause about a code of ethics, and that will make the lawsuit much easier for us. In fact, it will be a piece of cake, she smiled slyly. How much do you think we can get out of them? I asked, feeling anger rising inside me. Well, we can get anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million, but of course we'll ask for much more. God knows Terry's father can afford it, she laughed. I like this. The only downside is the children. I can protect Angie, but there's nothing I can do for Ben, I said, suddenly realizing how quickly things were developing. I know, and there's nothing I can do about it. Unless we find a judge who thinks Sheila's trash, we'll have to live with it. I'm really sorry, but I wish it weren't so, she said with sincere regret. Okay, Lydia. Thanks for all the prep work. I'll let you know when and where the convention is and what hotel she's staying at, in case your boyfriend can't come up with anything by then. I was exhausted. All of this had drained me of every last ounce of energy. I wanted to go home and sleep for a week or two, hoping that by then it would all be over. Of course, I knew that wouldn't happen. There was still a long road ahead. I managed to get through the next 3 weeks without arousing Sheila's suspicion. Maybe she wasn't paying attention, or maybe she was so confident that she didn't bother. The day before she left, she packed her things, took her suitcase and travel bag to the front door, and got ready to leave in the morning. She had no idea what was in store for her that weekend. When I got up at my usual time on Thursday morning, Sheila was already up and having breakfast. She was clearly in a hurry to leave and was pacing nervously around the kitchen. You're up early, I remarked coldly. Yes, I just wanted to make sure everything was okay before I left. Don't worry about it. Angie will take care of the housework, and I'll help her on the weekend. I assume you'll be back home Sunday morning? I offered. I don't know, morning or afternoon. We'll see. It's Terry's car, so I'll let you know, she replied hesitantly. She avoided my gaze. She knew what she had to do, but she didn't want to look me in the eye and admit it to herself. She couldn't have known that this weekend would be the last. Well, have a good time and don't forget to call, I said without a hint of sarcasm. She glanced at me briefly and then continued her uncoordinated activities. I couldn't remember her ever being so nervous. Perhaps she sensed a change in my attitude and was afraid I had noticed or suspected something. I couldn't understand. I finished my coffee, kissed her lightly on the cheek, and headed to the office. All day long, I wondered if she had figured out that I knew something. That would ruin my surprise, and I would be very upset. I didn't tell Lydia or anyone else about my plans for early Sunday morning. When I got to the office, I called Lydia, and she answered quickly. Lydia, can you confirm that we have photos of Gilson and Sheila in action? I asked quickly. Yes, we do. But I don't think you'll want to see them. Maybe after everything is over. For now, just let us deal with this, okay? She spoke in a hushed voice, and it was impossible to tell from her tone that she was upset. I assumed the photos would be quite compromising. The only upside was that it no longer mattered whether my little trick on Sunday morning had worked. The matter was settled. Are the divorce papers ready? Yes. We can file them any time you say. I have a little surprise for her on Sunday morning, so I think we can give her the papers at her parents' house on Monday morning. Can I confirm that on Sunday? I asked. Yes, but, Mick, you're not going to do anything stupid, are you? I could hear the alarm in her voice. No, of course not. I won't do anything to ruin everything, I promise. I hoped my words reassured this energetic woman. I didn't want anything to interfere with my plans. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Take care of yourself, Mick. I know this is a difficult time for you, but it will pass, and you will move on, I'm sure of it, she said sincerely. Lydia, I couldn't have done it without your help. The hardest part is telling the kids on Saturday about what's going on. I'm not really looking forward to it, I admitted. I'm sure you'll be fine. Good luck. If you need anything, call me or David, okay? Thanks, I said and hung up silently. I thought about telling the kids tonight, but changed my mind. One of them might call their mother and warn her. I wanted to minimize that risk. Sheila called in the evening, around 8, and her voice was very cheerful. She was enjoying the conference and the various booths. She had a nice room, and the restaurant served delicious food. She didn't talk to me for long, but spent more time on the phone with Angie and Ben. She gave us her room number, 1228. When the children went to bed at their usual time at 10 o'clock, I waited until they were asleep and called the hotel, asking for room 1228. If Sheila had answered, I would have simply wished her good night and said something nice. The phone rang at least 7 or 8 times, but no one answered. I hung up. Sheila called on Friday evening, again at about the same time. As before, we spoke briefly, and then she spoke to Angie and Ben. Her voice was different. Perhaps the excitement of the convention had worn off, or maybe something else? On Saturday, she called early just before 6. Fortunately, we were all home. Our conversation was again brief and not very personal. She was going out to dinner with a large group and said she would be home late. I wasn't upset, I was relieved. When Angie, Ben, and I sat down to dinner, the table was very quiet. Everyone seemed lost in their own thoughts. Finally, I realized I couldn't put it off any longer. We cleared the table, put the dishes in the dishwasher, and I turned to them both. Kids, I need to talk to you, I began. Ben and Angie looked at me, and I could tell they knew what I was going to say. This isn't easy to tell you, so I'll just tell you what's going to happen. I took 2 shiny new house keys out of my pocket. These are your new house keys. The only person who has these keys is me. Your mother is not coming back to our house, I finally forced myself to say. Angie gasped, and Ben's eyes widened and his mouth fell open. For the past year, your mother has been having an affair with her boss, Terry Gilson. She betrayed me, you, and her marriage vows. I can't live with her anymore, and I won't let her come back to this house. I paused. Oh, Dad. Oh, no, Angie cried. Why did she do that? I don't know, but honestly, that's not what matters most to me right now. I know this will hurt you, but there's nothing I can do about it. For the past year, she's been seeing Mr. Gilson at least twice a week. That's over 100 times. My anger began to boil over, and I noticed Ben's nose wrinkle slightly. That conference she's going to. It's just a cover so they can spend the weekend together. Well, they're not fooling anyone, I muttered. Dad, what's going to happen now? Ben asked, still reeling from my words. I filed for divorce, and your mother will be served as soon as she gets back to town. There are a few more things that need to happen with Mr. Gilson, but you don't need to worry about that right now. I'll keep you posted. I paused again. They must have been in shock from what I had said in the last 5 minutes. Does that mean I'll never see Mom again? Ben asked on the verge of tears. No. I wouldn't do that to you, Ben. I know how important she is to you, and I wouldn't do that. Most likely, you'll live with her from the beginning. When you turn 18, like Angie, you can see both of us whenever you want. Angie, you can decide for yourself where you want to live. It will be your choice, I said, looking into my daughter's sad eyes. This is terrible, Dad. It's tearing the family apart. It's terrible, she said with tears in her eyes. Yes, I know. Unfortunately, these decisions are made by the court, not me. I've thought long and hard about this. I could tell your mother everything I know and just move on, but I can't do that. I have to admit, I'm very, very angry with your mother. She lied to us. She lied to us. I don't think I can just forgive her, I admitted. Ben turned away, quietly climbed the stairs to his room, and closed the door behind him. He's in shock, I thought. I'll go see him later when he's had time to process what happened. I turned to Angela, who looked at me sadly, came over and hugged me. I'm so sorry, Dad. I know how much it hurts. I can't believe she did that again, she cried. I tilted my head back and stared at my daughter. Again? Angie nodded, her eyes downcast. Tell me, please, I said quietly. It was 4 years ago. I had just started my period, and I was having problems with my cycle. One morning when I was in class, I started having severe cramps. I went to the nurse, and she sent me home with a note from my mom telling her what to buy for me. When I walked into the house, she and Mr. Morissette were sitting on the couch. It was perfectly clear what they were doing. I must have screamed and ran upstairs to my room. I could hear them talking and moving around. And then the door slammed shut. A few minutes later, my mom came into my room. At this point, Angie burst into tears, and tears streamed down her face. What happened next? I had to be patient. I had to let Angie tell me everything in her own way. Mom said that if I told you or anyone else, you would get divorced and I would never see you again. She said that the court would always give custody to Mom, and you would be so angry with her that you would probably leave home and I would never see you again. She looked at me and shook her head. I was scared, Dad. I believed her. I couldn't lose you. Not then, not ever. I guess I promised Mom I wouldn't tell anyone. Except Ben, I haven't told anyone else until now. I hugged her again and held her close. That sneaky bitch had used Angie's love for me against her and made her keep quiet. So Gilson wasn't the first or the only one. I started wondering how many there could have been. How could I have been so stupid? How had she managed to pull this off without me suspecting a thing? Was I so stupid that I didn't notice what was going on? Or was she smarter than I thought? Angie, I don't know what to say to you except that I love you. I'll do everything I can to be a good father, no matter what happens in the future. You're old enough to make your own decisions, and I want you to know that whatever decision you make, I will support you, and it won't change how much I love you. I didn't think I could say anything else. Thank you, Dad. I know that. And I know I want to be here with you. You need someone. And I think you have me. She smiled through her tears. We hugged again. I think I'd better go upstairs and talk to Ben. I'm sure it's going to be really hard for him to get over. Did you tell him about Mr. Morissette? Yes, about a month after it happened. Ben said she had been acting strange, and he noticed that Mom and I had been avoiding each other. I told him what I saw. And how did he react? I asked. Funny. Like it wasn't a big surprise, or maybe he suspected something, Angie replied thoughtfully. I was sure he'd think I was lying, but he didn't say anything. He just pouted and kept quiet. I nodded, got up and headed for the stairs and Ben's room. I knocked quietly, turned the handle, and opened the door carefully. Ben was sitting on his bed, staring blankly out the window. It took him a few seconds to notice me, but he still didn't say anything. I'm sorry, Ben. You know I wouldn't have hurt you if I could have avoided it. I hope you understand that I couldn't let things continue the way they were, I said quietly. He nodded and turned to me. I'm sorry too, Dad. Mom really hurt a lot of people, didn't she? He whispered barely audibly. Yes, she did. I don't know how this will all end, but I'm sure your grandparents will be very upset, I replied. Why, Dad? Why? I don't know, Ben. She never gave me the slightest reason to think she was unhappy or dissatisfied with her life. Not once, I repeated. I hate her, he muttered suddenly. No, don't do that, Ben. She loves you. You can be sure of that. It's something else, something I don't understand. Maybe she doesn't understand either. But don't let anger consume you. I know you love her. Maybe in time you'll be able to forgive her. I know she would never want to hurt you or Angie. Never, I said as confidently as I could. He turned back to me with a devastated look. I put my hand on his shoulder to calm him down. A few minutes later, I got up, left his room, and closed the door behind me. After I woke up on Sunday morning, all hell broke loose. Sheila tried to call home, but I called Angie and Ben, and we went out for breakfast. We didn't have much of an appetite, but we needed to get out of the house. I also turned off my phone and asked Angie to do the same. I didn't want Sheila to get upset over nothing. I told the kids what I had done when I called early in the morning, and Angie laughed. Ben smiled, and I knew they approved. Why didn't I feel relieved? After breakfast, we drove to the park by the river and went for a walk together. In a strange way, we all felt better. Perhaps it was because the tension and anticipation of what was to come had eased. Angie and Ben knew what was going to happen and when it was going to happen. As for me, I had a knot in my stomach that refused to go away. I had started a process that would end in the breakdown of my marriage and the collapse of my family. I still had to talk to my parents, but that was one of the two important things I had to do today. Of course, I also had to call Lydia and tell her what I had done. I was afraid to talk to George and Amy Pratt, Sheila's parents. We were close, and they adored their grandchildren. I wasn't sure how they would react to the news or whose side they would take. I decided to leave things as they were until Sheila made her own decision. She needed a place to live, and I suspected she would run away home. First, I called Lydia Pancratz. I told her about my little prank, and she laughed at my audacity. I wouldn't want that, she smiled. I hope you had fun, Mick. Not really. Cheap revenge, I guess. But now she knows, and she knows some of the consequences, I said, noticing a hint of anger in my voice. What about the kids, Mick? I talked to them last night, and I think they're okay. They're not very happy, as you can imagine, but they understand. And I think we need to wait and see what long-term effect this has on them, I said. But I have another surprise. What? Lydia was taken aback for a moment. Angie told me that about 4 years ago she caught her mother with another man. Sheila threatened Angie. She told her that I would divorce her. She would get custody of the children and they would never see me again. She blackmailed her into keeping quiet, I concluded. My God, she could have done that? Lydia asked in amazement. I thought I knew her. I was wrong. I don't know her at all. She's just a disgusting woman, I said more with regret than anger. Lydia was probably wondering what would happen next. After a few minutes of silence, she spoke again. Be there for Angie and Ben, Mick. They need your support. They're going to have a hard time for a while. Be there for them, she concluded. Thanks again for your help, Lydia. As soon as I find out where Sheila is, I'll let you know so you can take care of her. We said goodbye and I hung up abruptly. It would be much harder to get through to my parents. Fortunately, the conversation with my parents was short. I described the situation and their first reaction was concern for Angie and Ben. I mentioned that I had spoken to them last night and that they seemed fine today. That seemed to reassure my mother, and they both said we would talk later when things settled down. I wondered when that would be. I turned off my phone again. It beeped to indicate I had a new call, and I was sure it was Sheila. She wasn't on the list of people I planned to talk to today. Angie, Ben, and I sat down on a park bench, and I explained that I didn't want to be near the house for the next few hours. I expected their mother to rush home and try to get in. When she found that her key was useless, she would surely raise a ruckus. I suggested we leave town and not come back until after dinner, then return. They agreed, and we discussed where we could go. There was an outdoor fair in a small town a few miles south, and we decided to check it out. The fair turned out to be very interesting and fun. We ate hot dogs to keep from getting hungry and generally enjoyed the old-fashioned country fair. It took our minds off our problems and allowed us to think about something else. We didn't get back to town until around 7 and stopped at a nice restaurant for dinner. We knew that sooner or later we would have to face the changes in our lives, but this last day was a chance to get away from it all and find some peace and quiet. When we got home, it was almost 9 o'clock. Sheila was nowhere to be found and the house was dark. I parked the car in the garage and we entered the house, turning on the lights as we went. Nothing had changed in the house since we left for breakfast that morning. The kids went to their rooms and got ready for bed. I turned on the TV, but there was nothing interesting on, so I went to bed too. It was a restless night. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring. I knew that my phone call and the delivery of the divorce papers would have consequences. It was only a matter of time. On Monday morning, I turned my phones back on. I didn't expect Sheila to call so early. I was wrong. Almost immediately, the phone rang. We didn't have caller ID, so I had no idea who could be calling so early. I decided to take a chance. Hello, I greeted cautiously. Mick? Mick, please, we need to talk. Of course, it was Sheila. Talk about what? I asked quietly, trying not to wake the children. Oh God, Mick, I'll explain everything. It's not what you think, she moaned. That's the second time you've said that. What do you think I think? I asked defiantly. It wasn't a romance, it was just a stupid mistake. Don't ruin our marriage over a stupid mistake, she begged. You must think I'm the stupidest person on the planet, Sheila. I know for a fact that you've been having fun with that jerk Gilson for at least a year. And now I know that Francis Morissette is on your friends list. We have photos and all the necessary evidence. This is going to be ugly, Sheila. And you're the only one to blame, I promise you. It's going to be very unpleasant. With that, I hung up and turned off the phone again. I went to work and told Larry Coleman that I was getting a divorce and asked him not to transfer any calls from my wife. He agreed and quickly went to Gloria to inform her of our request. I returned to my office and attempted to immerse myself in the papers on my desk. I managed to do that pretty well until 11 o'clock, when the phone rang. It was George Pratt, my father-in-law. Good morning, George. I guess I know why you're calling. I'm sorry I didn't warn you and Amy, I said, anticipating his response. I think I understand, but I want to hear it from you, Mick. You've always been honest with me, so tell me what the hell happened, he demanded. I told him about my warnings to Sheila about Gilson, about her affair with him, and about the other affair with Morissette. When I finished summarizing her actions, there was a long silence on the line. My God, he finally said in a quiet voice. I had no idea she was capable of that. Are you absolutely sure about this, Mick? He asked, hoping to hear at least a hint of relief. I'm very sorry, George. I'm afraid I'm not only sure, but I also have photographic evidence, I said, sympathizing with this wonderful man. He deserved better from his daughter. As long as she stays here, Mick, are you going to start divorce proceedings? Yes, all the papers are ready. She'll get a summons to either get a job or, well, I'm sorry, but it might happen at your house, I apologized. I understand. I won't hide the fact that it will hurt not only her, but also her mother. I know you're not to blame, but, well, whatever. I hope, Mick, that the grandchildren will still visit us, he concluded hopefully. Of course they will. This has nothing to do with you or Amy, George. I would never do this to you or the children. You will always be welcome here, I said sincerely. Thanks, Mick. I'm sorry, but... Thanks, he said sadly, and hung up. When I put the phone down, the emotions left me. I expected there to be many more moments like this in the weeks and months to come. I had to prepare myself for them. I found out that Sheila had left for work that morning and, surprisingly, was still working. Gilson had no idea that all this could come crashing down on him in an instant, and apparently decided to ignore it. When Lydia confirmed that my wife had arrived at work on time, she sent a bailiff to her, and Sheila had barely finished her morning coffee when she was handed the divorce papers. According to witnesses, she immediately left the building in a rage. I assume she ran to her parents, but that wasn't the most interesting part. Shortly thereafter, Terry Gilson and Knox Gilson received court orders stating my intention to file a lawsuit for damages based on alienation of affection and willful disregard of corporate responsibility, i.e., failure to comply with a moral clause in specific employment contracts. The lawsuits sought punitive and compensatory damages in the amount of $5 million. The circus began. Reconstructing the events much later, I learned that Knox Gilson had a falling out with his son Terry and practically disowned him. No more easy assignments, no help with angry husbands, and if he didn't get his act together, no inheritance. Knox had spoiled his son for over 20 years and finally got his way. Sooner or later, this maturing teenager had to grow up. Terry did exactly what you'd expect. He left and got drunk. Since he'd been kicked out of the car dealership, he had nowhere to go but his townhouse. He disappeared into that cave for a few days. I knew that the wheels of justice turned slowly. Stupidly, Sheila decided to contest the divorce until Lydia provided her lawyer with the evidence we had, including the photographs. That was enough to knock her morale. Lydia would have done everything possible to limit the size of my financial punishment, but in the worst case, she would have gotten half of everything, a reward for her treachery. The week passed agonizingly slowly. I went to work, but I couldn't pretend to be productive. Larry was very understanding and patient, but I knew it couldn't go on like this forever. I had to think about my future as a single man and a single father. The prospect was daunting. On Saturday, I was mowing the lawn when I heard a noise on the driveway. A car door slammed, and a few seconds later, I heard someone knocking on my front door. Neither Angie nor Ben was home, so I walked around the side of the house and ran into Terry Gilson. He looked like he'd been dragged behind a tractor for miles. He was in terrible shape, but when I looked at his face, I knew something was wrong. That's the last thing I remember before he hit me with his huge fist. The next thing I remember is waking up in the hospital. Well, not exactly waking up, more like brief flashes of consciousness. I was lying on my back and felt numb pain. Apparently, it took me more than 24 hours to finally come to my senses. I would slip in and out of consciousness, barely catching fragments of the here and now. At some point, I realized that someone was next to me. I could feel someone's hand, but I couldn't open my eyes, or at least I didn't want to. They were like two balls rolling around the bottom of a tin can. I heard a strange voice, but although it sounded familiar, I couldn't connect it with my memories or understand who it could be. I tried to remember what could have brought me to this place, and after a while, I remembered Gilson's face, and then his fist. A day or two later, I learned that my mother and Angie had been at my bedside almost the entire time I was in intensive care. I tried to smile at them, but it hurt, and I hoped they understood how grateful I was that they were there. I think I heard Angie say that Ben would come after school, and I tried to smile again. Just the thought of it hurt. It was over a week before I could talk to the doctor. He started from the very beginning. I had suffered a concussion when I hit the wooden frame of the garage door when Gilson hit me. My right shoulder was dislocated, and the upper part of my right arm was badly bruised. I was saved by Felicia Romano, who had witnessed most of the altercation, shouting from her kitchen window, causing Gilson to look up and realize he was being watched. He rushed to his car, drove out of our driveway, and sped away through the neighborhood. Felicia had the good sense to call 911, and that's how I ended up in the hospital. Gilson was identified by both Felicia and another neighbor who recognized his license plate number as he drove down our street. There aren't many white 1964 Ford Galaxy convertibles in our town, and within a couple of hours, Gilson was spotted leaving a bar and acting erratically. To make matters worse, Gilson was arrested for drunk driving and resisting arrest. He just didn't know when to quit. When he was booked, they found the assault report filed by Mrs. Felicia Romano and information about my hospitalization. After Felicia was questioned, Gilson was charged with aggravated assault, assault with intent, and unlawful entry. He was in deep trouble, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. When he called his father from jail, Knox Gilson didn't answer the phone. I wanted to be there, but I was unconscious and lying on an operating table where my spleen was being removed. 2 days after I started to regain consciousness, a plainclothes police officer came to see me and asked me to give a statement. I told him everything I remembered, which wasn't much. My face red with anger and my fist clenched. He asked what could have provoked the attack, and I told him about Terry's affair with my wife, the divorce, and the lawsuits. He nodded a couple of times, thanked me, and left. Epilogue. During the divorce settlement, Sheila didn't behave very nicely. I'll buy her share of our house. She was awarded the absolute minimum, no alimony, and was given a stern lecture about her contribution to my trauma. Knox fired both Terry and Sheila. When our divorce was final, she was looking for work. Her name was tarnished in certain circles, and I doubted she would ever find a decent job in our town. Ben lives with Sheila, but according to Angie, their relationship isn't what it used to be. I see Ben every weekend. We got the judge to allow him to visit me. He seems to be getting stronger, but he's not the kid I remember from the good times. Angie is still Angie. She's my girlfriend, and she keeps me in line. She runs the household, watches what I eat, and keeps me on my workout schedule. If I didn't know any better, she could be my mother. My in-laws have always been there for us and helped out when we needed it. They have no idea how important that has been for us over the last few weeks. I just didn't need any extra pressure. George and Amy, thank God, have remained friends. They are deeply disappointed in Sheila, but she is their only child, and they feel obligated to support her during this difficult time. Having Ben around is a big plus for them. In a way, they're spoiling him, but I don't mind. I just want Ben to get through this and come out of it unscathed. Angie comes to visit me. She and her mother are talking to each other again, but I get the impression that their relationship is strained at best. The lawsuits won't go to trial, of course. According to my lawyer friends Dave and Lydia, Knox Gilson won't let that happen. We'll settle for a very large sum, and I'll be set for years, even after taxes and legal fees. I already know that I will be able to pay for Angie and Ben's college education and buy them a car. At least something good will come out of all this mess. Physically, I've recovered as much as possible. I lost my spleen, but my kidneys, ribs, and shoulder are almost healed. I go to physical therapy 3 times a week and will continue for some time. I still have pain that comes and goes every day. My doctor thinks my testicles are functioning at 80%, but I haven't had a chance to check yet. Right now, I'm not particularly interested in the opposite sex. When I get the money from the court, I'm going to buy Jimmy and Felicia something special. Jimmy was there for me when I needed him, and Felicia may have saved my life. Nothing will be too expensive for those two. I often wonder what will happen next. I still can't get over what Sheila did to us, but I think I'll get through the worst of it eventually. I quit Polar Industries, or at least I tried to. Larry wouldn't hear of it and said he was putting me on indefinite leave. Someday I'll have a lot of money, and I'm trying to decide what I'm going to do with it. I think I know. Frank Clay, one of my best customers and an old friend since I started out in sales, wants to retire and sell his building materials business. It's a good business with a well-balanced mix of retail and construction customers. He's part of the Build Right buyer group, which helps him compete with the big stores. Dave Murney and I are going to meet with old Frank and see if we can make it happen. Ben was the first to volunteer to work weekends and summers when he heard about my plan. That doesn't change anything. I want him to be around, and I want him to be okay for the next few years. Teenage years are hard enough without a broken family. I look at Knox and Terry Gilson, and I realize that's what happens when you don't pay enough attention to your kids and aren't close to them. I've had a lot of time to think about what happened to me and our family. I'm the first to admit that I took it personally and wanted revenge with a vengeance. I still feel that way. Maybe if I had only had to deal with Gilson, things would have been different. I can imagine how he could have charmed and bewitched a woman like Sheila. But when I found out about Morissette and how she blackmailed our daughter to keep her quiet, all thoughts of compassion disappeared. Dave says Terry will spend 2 to 4 years in prison for assaulting me. We also discussed a civil suit, but there's no one to file it. His father disowned him. He has no job, no skills, and no prospects. When he gets out of prison, he'll be in his 50s with a bleak future ahead of him. There's nothing more we can do to hurt him. Surprisingly, Knox Gilson came to see me while I was in rehab. He apologized for everything that had happened and for his good-for-nothing son. I accepted his apology as sincere. He understood well that the emotional damage his son had caused me was accompanied by physical damage. We shook hands, and I changed my opinion of Mr. Gilson Sr. a little. And that's it, a sad story. I thought I had the perfect family. Hell, I was sure I had the perfect family. I can look back and remember the good times we had together, or I can look back with anger. Maybe someday I'll be able to do the former, because right now I'm still struggling with the latter. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, so subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.